So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully.
Breaking news, the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, is currently testifying in front of Congress, and it is getting incredibly intense. I have a bunch of clips and I have a bunch of updates about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the 20-year-old who tried to assassinate former President Donald Trump a little over a week ago. I'm also incredibly excited to continue covering VP Harris in her race to the presidency. Make sure you leave a like on the video if you are also excited. Also, click the first link in the description to check out my prosecutor versus felon merch. So the first article I want to break down comes from Fox News, actually, straight from the source Fox News. They are finally admitting that the shooter was not politically motivated. They say, profiler says Trump shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks, likely not politically motivated, was organized thinker. And the significance of this coming from Fox News is actually quite large because they were one of the first stations to draw up this narrative that this was a radical liberal who was trying to kill former President Donald Trump, who was motivated by President Biden's inflammatory rhetoric, even though President Biden is quite boring with his rhetoric, in my opinion, which is a good thing. They keep trying to use this phrase bullseye. They're trying to imply that Thomas Matthew Crooks was motivated by Biden saying the word bullseye in a closed-door meeting just a few days before the rally. It makes zero sense, but Fox News is now admitting it makes zero sense. They said, a criminal profiler said Thomas Matthew Crooks' assassination attempt on former President Trump in western Pennsylvania last week was likely not politically motivated and not a random act of violence. Keith Howard, the chief deputy at the Morgan County Sheriff's Office in Georgia and a criminal profiler, shared with Fox News Digital the behavioral science behind Crooks. Quote, as much chaos as these events may bring to what we observed, they really are organized thinkers. Think of it not as an impulsive act. They don't typically just wake up in the morning and go, there's going to be a presidential candidate in my county, in my district, so I'm going to go over and try to kill them. Regardless of how, if you look at this type of individual and go, well, he may have been a loner or didn't have many friends or weren't close, it doesn't mean he can't think. And if we do this behavioral analysis, if he's searching for something to be infamous for, then when he's searching for the Trump rallies and the Democratic National Convention and he sees that one is going to be in his backyard, now all of his actions have come into place. He then concludes, I would imagine that some of these things are being assessed by the FBI as they gather this information. And despite this being somebody who's talking to Fox News, it is actually a pretty good analysis. Thomas Matthew Crooks was looking to be infamous for some sort of political shooting. It didn't matter who the politician was. He was looking at people all across the aisle. He just finally had the opportunity to manifest these ideas because there was a politician in his backyard an hour away in Pennsylvania. So let's go through some of the updates as Kimberly Cheatle testifies in front of Congress. At 9 a.m., we learned the Secret Service admits some security modifications for Trump were not provided ahead of the assassination. Next, Mayorkas announces a bipartisan panel to conduct a 45-day review of security at the Trump rally. Now, I think a bipartisan panel is a good idea, but the Republicans on the panel will most likely derail it depending on who's on the panel. The panel will include Janet Napolitano, former Homeland Security Secretary, Francis Townsend, the former Homeland Secretary advisor to George W. Bush, Mark Phillip, former Deputy Attorney to George W. Bush, David Mitchell. It seems like a pretty solid panel. Representative Brendan Boyle becomes the first Democrat to call for Cheatle's resignation. So far, it's been a pretty partisan act. A lot of Republicans have been calling for Cheatle to resign. They've actually been following her around the RNC and screaming at her. It was kind of weird. Cheatle was in the Secret Service for 27 years before becoming its leader. Again, MAGA has been launching all of these unfounded attacks, calling Cheatle a DEI director because she's a woman, they've been saying some disgusting stuff that is unfounded. She has the experience. It seems like the Secret Service breakdown was probably not her fault solely. Comer opens hearing with call for Cheatle to resign. Raskin cites assassination attempt to call for stricter gun laws. That is a very, very savvy political move right there from Jamie Raskin. Next, Cheatle sworn in, calls assassination attempt, quote, the most significant failure at the Secret Service in decades. And that may be true. This is the one that had all of the headlines going crazy. A bunch of headlines. Comer swore in Cheatle following remarks from him and Raskin, and Cheatle began her opening statement. Quote, the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure at the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts, she said of the former president. Cheatle said that nothing she has said should be interpreted to blame the security failure at the Trump rally on federal, state, and local law enforcement who worked with the Secret Service in Butler. She also pledged to cooperate with congressional oversight, the FBI's investigation, and the Homeland Security Department's external review and examination by its internal watchdog. Cheatle said the level of security for Trump increased well before the campaign and has been, quote, steadily increasing as threats against him evolve. She noted that the Secret Service needs to be adequately resourced to serve current mission requirements and anticipate future requirements. Cheatle said there was a sufficient number of Secret Service agents assigned to Trump rally. Cheatle then said she's spoken with the counter-sniper who killed the gunman. In response to questions from GOP Representative Jim Jordan, Cheatle said she has briefed Mr. Biden and VP Harris about the attempted assassination.
It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been past information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
I do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified, and those individuals have to be investigated and determined what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.